Good afternoon. This is Eric with Alaska Statewide Weather, meteorologist with the National Weather Service for May 6, 2020. We have a couple options for you to further refine your weather search. A 1-800 number that'll take you through a menu system. Also, weather.gov/Alaska is where you can start. And if you'd like to further refine your search, you can remove Alaska and put in Fairbanks, Juneau, or Anchorage. And again, that helps you further refine your search for your area of concern. Lastly, we do allow you to email us with any questions or concerns, hear what we do on this TV program, or within the Weather Service in general. Please contact if you have any questions. For the hazards map, I did mention that we had a warning out for Queethlick. They had some high water there. A couple homes had some water, so there is a warning out for Queethlick until this evening through 7:30 p.m. We also have an advisory out for portions of the lower Kuskokwim River. Please check the local listings with hazards online there at weather.gov/Alaska to get the latest and greatest as far as hazardous weather and the watch and warning timeline. For the Alaska breakout map for Wednesday, May 6th, we did have a lot of activity there on the upper Yukon. Eagle did report that the ice went out there last evening or yesterday afternoon about 3:30 yesterday afternoon. That was the big development. So ice is developing and slowly, ice is moving across more portions of the upper Yukon. The Riverwatch team is now focusing on the middle Yukon. They're going to be focusing on Tanana down through Galena. There's still some in-place ice there, local shifting of the ice through much of that region, and some openings in several stretches of the river there. Otherwise, the Tanana is mostly open, and Salcha is some open, but otherwise, the Kuskokwim, again, flood warning out for Queethlick through this evening. Otherwise, flood advisories out for portions of the lower Kuskokwim. Again, please check your local listing for the hazards in your area. Taking a look at the satellite data today, you can see that occluded front moving through the western Bering Sea and through Shemya today. We did have a little bit of shower activity in the Bristol Bay region around Dillingham, a little bit of rainfall there. Otherwise, there was scattered rain showers across portions of the interior, and again, some weak rain showers, or scattered rain showers across portions of the Panhandle into the northeast Gulf Coast. You can also see that along the coastal areas of the west coast and across the Arctic coast, you can see that there was that little bit of graying. There is some sea stratus there with onshore flow across the Arctic coast there, bringing some cloudy conditions and freezing fog in that area. Otherwise, in the Bering Sea, the 988 millibar low in extreme eastern Russia occluded front out ahead of that system, with snow showers and rain across portions of the southern Bering and into the central Aleutians. Like I mentioned, we did have some reports of rain showers in the Bristol Bay area along and into Kodiak Island. Otherwise, scattered rain showers across the interior around a 1021 millibar high. And there's also a weak trough pushing through the Panhandle, bringing some scattered rain showers in that area. Also into the northeast Gulf Coast, and the next system approaching the southern Gulf with a 994 millibar low. For tonight's weather, we're going to be looking at the 996 millibar low now. The occluded front is so much stationary now with snow and mixed precipitation in the central Bering, rain showers through the eastern Aleutians, and then a weak trough in the southern mainland, bringing some clouds and a mix of precipitation in the northeast Gulf Coast with scattered rain showers out in the coastal areas and down through the coastal mountains. Again, nice weather forming over the Panhandle with a 1034 millibar high, and that another high over there in the Yukon Territory. And again, there's that freezing fog along the Arctic coast and down through the west coast with some sea stratus. Otherwise, a 994 millibar low now in the central Gulf with an occluder front approaching the coastal areas of southern mainland. For Thursday weather, 1003 millibar low now with a trough associated with weak rain showers across the eastern Aleutians approaching the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula, otherwise scattered snow showers along that system in the central Bering, and the next system approaching the western Aleutians with a warm front, 992 millibar low now in the central Gulf, occluded front out ahead of that system. Moderate to heavy rain is predicted for Kodiak, and also moderate rain in portions of Prince William Sound and eastern Kenai Peninsula, and scattered rain showers across the northern part of the Alaska Peninsula. We are going to go for some thunder showers in the eastern interior and some rain showers in that area. 1030 millibar high now over the Panhandle, producing some nice weather in that region. Again, there's the fog across the Arctic coast with weak onshore flow. For Friday's weather, 972 millibar low now pushing through the western Aleutians with an occluded front, triple point, moderate rain in the central Aleutians, warm front, cold front, and rain associated with that system in the southern part of that band there. Otherwise, troughiness across the southern mainland, bringing some clouds across the region, scattered rain and rain showers across eastern Kenai Peninsula down through Kodiak Island with a 998 millibar low and a trough in the eastern Gulf. And decent weather continues over the Panhandle, and there's that fog continuing with weak onshore flow across the Arctic coast. For low temperatures, Thursday morning, single digits and teens across the North Slope, and 30s and 20s there at Adigan Pass, 30s and maybe even a 40 there in Dillingham across much of the central part of the state. Fairbanks 38, 40 in Anchorage, 41 in Kodiak, 30s across the Alaska Peninsula and to the Aleutians. St. Paul 34, also 38 in Yakutat, 40s through the Panhandle. For Thursday afternoon, looking at temperatures reaching into the teens and 20s across the Arctic coast there, into the North Slope, Adigan Pass now 38, Tuvik Pass 38, Kotzebue 34, 40 in Nome, 58 in Fort Yukon, 59 in Eagle, 63 in Fairbanks, 61 in McGrath, 60s through much of the interior part of the state and down through the southwest, with 58 in Bethel and 59 in King Salmon, 58 in Dillingham, 49 in Kodiak, 40s, maybe even a 50 there across portions of Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutians. Cordova 47, 54 Yakutat, 50s across much of the Panhandle, 49 in 49 in Ketchikan. And then Friday morning, again, teens across the North Slope. And Tuvik Pass 22, 22 in Adigan as well. Fort Yukon 38, 31 in Eagle. Kotzebue 31, Ambler 34, 30s and 40s through the central part of the state down through the southwest. 41 in Fairbanks, 36 in Northway, 38 in McGrath. Aniak 43, 40 in Bethel. Dillingham 41, King Salmon 40, 43 in Kodiak, 40s and even mid-30s across the rest of the Alaska Peninsula and into the Aleutians. Cordova 43, 30s and low 40s across the Panhandle. Lastly, for Friday afternoon, temperatures reaching into the 60s there across much of the interior down through the southwest. Otherwise, teens and low 20s across the North Slope, with Kaktovik 23, Ukqiavik 18, 40 in Kotzebue, 43 in Nome, and then 65 in Fairbanks, 65 in McGrath, 63 in Aniak, 56 in Anchorage, and 50s through the Panhandle, 40s through Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians. This is Eric Holloway for Alaska Statewide Weather.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Taking a look at the flying weather for Thursday morning, we're going to have some low clouds and ceilings across much of the northwest coast and north slope with IFR conditions in that area with onshore flow. Also, a weak occluded front in the Bering Sea will create some IFR conditions out that way, and you can see the early development of a next system moving into the Gulf down, creating there some marginal conditions in the Gulf of Alaska. For Thursday afternoon, that weakening occluded now a trough, creating still some marginal conditions there. Weak onshore flow across the north slope, marginal conditions that way, up that way. And again, with the next system moving into the Gulf, IFR conditions showing up there in Kodiak Island and the North Gulf area and down into the Alaska Peninsula. For Friday morning, again, some weakening system there in the northern Bering, creating IFR conditions, marginal conditions through much of the rest of the Bering down through the Alaska Peninsula. Another system showing up in the western Aleutians, creating IFR conditions there. And again, onshore flow across the north slope will create IFR conditions across the region. And once again, the low developing in the North Gulf will create IFR conditions there. For Friday afternoon, again, that system moving into the Aleutians, into the Bering Sea, IFR conditions out that way. And marginal conditions across the north slope, and marginal conditions and isolated to scattered areas of IFR conditions across the Gulf Coast region from Kodiak Island and eastern Kenai Peninsula. For past conditions, again, continued very nice flying weather. All passes pretty much VFR conditions. We did have one area that will be marginal, and that's in the Portage area, but otherwise Anaktuvik VFR, Adigan VFR, Lake Clark and Merrill VFR, Rainy VFR, Windy VFR, Isabel VFR, Mentasta VFR, Tanita VFR, and Portage VFR early and then lowering to marginal as that system comes into the Gulf. And Chilkoot and White also marginal, improving to VFR during the day. Freezing levels Thursday morning. The surface comes across the Bering Sea and meanders across the mainland and out through the Panhandle. Chaotic scene with elevated freezing levels across the mainland up to 4,000 feet in portions of the mainland, 6,000 feet near the border. Otherwise, we're going to be seeing 8,000 to 10,000 feet across the Panhandle and also across the western and central Aleutians. Icing conditions for Thursday, we'll be looking at between 8,000 and 10,000 feet there along that occluded front, and between 5,000 and 10,000 feet down there along the North Gulf, Kodiak Island, and the eastern Kenai Peninsula. Jet stream Thursday, 135 knots coming across the Bering, cutting across the western Aleutians down through the eastern Kenai Peninsula, 140 knots there as it exits around that low, and then coming around that low into the Panhandle, 55 knots there in the northeast Gulf Coast, 40 knots across the Panhandle, and even 30 to 35 knots across the Brooks Range on Thursday. For Thursday, 9,000 foot winds around that low in the Gulf. And around the low in the Gulf is 65 knots there, 30 knots as you get into the Panhandle, 45 knots as you reach the Kenai Peninsula, 44 knots as you get into the Alaska Peninsula, and then around the other low in the Bering, 50 knots comes into the Bering Sea there. And 3,000 foot winds on Thursday. Again, that low pressure system, 30, 40, and even 50 knots there as you across the Gulf region as you come off into the northern Gulf, 60 to 65 knots around that low pressure system. Otherwise, weakened variable conditions across the mainland and down through the Aleutians at, again, 3,000 feet. Turbulence for Wednesday, below 4,000 feet across portions of south central into Bristol Bay region, with Kodiak Island in there as well, and also below 3,000 feet across the central and western Aleutians. Lastly, pretty nice conditions across much of the mainland and into the Panhandle.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us today is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thank you for joining us, Eric.
My pleasure, Dave.
Thank you. And you're joining us here to talk a little bit more about satellites and how satellites work, and especially one neat feature that's working over Alaska right now. What is that?
Well, there's a lot of weather satellites and a lot of instruments on these satellites, and there are new generations going up and new instruments. This includes something called the day-night band, which is not a cover band at the local bar, but it's a new satellite that is very useful, especially here in Alaska, especially in the winter.
In the wintertime, yeah, that makes it a little bit hard to use some of the normal tools that we associate with weather satellite imagery.
Right. You know, one of the classic weather satellite instruments is just visible light. What would the human eye see if you were riding on a weather satellite yourself and looked down and it was black and white? You'd see the clouds reflecting the sunlight. And we've got an example from the Pacific Ocean. There's a geostationary satellite, and we can see that the eastern side of the image is in daylight. The western side, it's night over there, so you don't see anything because there's no sunlight over there. And visible imagery, it's very intuitive. You see the clouds just like you see them standing on the ground, but now you're a satellite seeing them from above. But the problem is, what about the night side of the planet? How do you track the storms? How do you know where the rain is, the snow, the weather, if you can't see the clouds? And that's why, just like a television can change from one channel to another, or radio can change stations, satellites can change the frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum that they're looking at. We can go to infrared instead of visible light. You know, it's heat energy. You can see heat, and we've got another satellite picture from the same time, same satellite, out over the Pacific Ocean. That's the infrared side, and we're seeing temperature there. And even at night, when there's no light, everything still has a temperature.
So we're sensing something with a thermometer instead of perhaps the visible side of that, is what you're saying?
That's right. On this depiction, colder features are lighter shades, warmer features are dark. And so clouds tend to be colder than the ground. Clouds are higher in the atmosphere, it's cooler. And so that very same image on the western or the left-hand side of the globe, now we can see the clouds there, even though it's nighttime, because we're seeing the temperatures. And one nice feature is that tropical storm there, just in the middle of the northern hemisphere there, hurricane or typhoon, depending on...
That's that swirly part that we see in the middle of the image?
There you go. You can even see the eye on it there, especially in the infrared image. So we've got two kinds of imagery there from the same satellite, different instruments, you know, different channels like on a television, visible and infrared. You know, it turns out there's no one magic tool. Each has its strengths, each has its flaws, weaknesses. The visible is nice, it's intuitive, it's easy to understand, but doesn't work at night. Infrared is nice, it works at night, you can see temperatures, but there is a catch. What if your clouds and the nearby bare ground or open water, what if those were about the same temperature?
Oh, that's going to be hard to figure out what's going on.
If you can only see temperature and you have two features that are the same temperature, they will look the same. You won't be able to tell. They're camouflaged. This happens, especially, it can happen around Alaska, especially over the ocean when you have low clouds that are the same temperature as the open water.
That happens quite a bit in Alaska.
We have an example. Now, this is from a different geostationary satellite. It's down over the Atlantic Ocean. Look in the South Atlantic. In infrared, we've highlighted in a yellow circle there. There's some patches of clouds, but it looks like there's a clear area in the middle of that image. That's the infrared look. But let's take a look at the visible channel, and we can see there's a stripe of clouds across the middle of that circle that is only visible in the visible. The trick here is that those are low clouds of about the same temperature as the surrounding ocean. So from an infrared point of view, where you're seeing temperature, the clouds in the water nearby are the same temperature, they look the same. It's only on the visible that you can see what stands out as the actual imagery. Two tools, each have their strengths and weaknesses. Can we combine them? That's where the day-night band comes in. It's a super sensitive visible sensor that can actually see by moonlight. It can even see the aurora. And in Alaska, we have long winter nights. We can use that day-night band. Here's an example from that storm that blew the Kullik drilling platform ashore near Kodiak Island in December back in 2012. This image is right near when that storm happened, and it's in the middle of the night in December.
But this looks like visible imagery.
Looks like daytime imagery. It's amazing. That sensor can take any little bit of moonlight and just make the most of it. We can see so much detail. Even in the northern part of the image there, you can see some aurora up there. The northern lights
That's
are...
that band that goes across the Arctic slope?
You got it. That's the northern lights. We're seeing black and white image here,
Yeah.
so you don't get the green or the purple colors
How
there.
about that?
But that is the aurora. There's another example of the day-night band, and this is from January of 2013. It's about 4 in the morning, and this is a snapshot from Weather Service software. And we can even see in the middle of the image, there's the lights of Fairbanks and North Pole over to Eielson Air Force Base. Anchorage and Matsu lights, city lights, are evident as well.
Sure
We can see, even though it's 4 in the morning in January, there is no sunlight to be had, that just enough moonlight is available that this sensor can see that. So we're trying to solve that puzzle where visible light is good, but only during the daytime. IR is good at night, but you can't see the difference between clouds and ground sometime.
Right.
The day-night band is an attempt to do the best of both with one tool. And it's brand new for Alaska here, and we're hoping to use it in the forecast process and help predict storms, weather patterns, to help get good forecasts for people.
Okay, another tool in the weather toolkit for meteorologists in Alaska and researchers worldwide. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today. And you can learn more about Dehne and the day-night band by going to the web address that you see on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Let's take a look at the sea ice analysis for today. You can see some Polinos opening up there, and that has extended across much of the northern Bering Sea. We do think that the lower concentration of ice there just off the Seward Peninsula is associated with a warm current. Short fast ice remains in place there in Norton Sound, Kotzebue Sound, and portions along the coast off the YK Delta. Otherwise, with northerly flow, we do expect a slight southern progression of the ice pack into over the next couple of days. For Thursday's marine forecast for southeast, winds in the inside waters generally from the north or northeast at 10 knots. Of the southern inside waters, winds generally from the southeast at 15 knots. Outside waters, small crafts, advisories out for outside waters, winds generally from the southeast 25 to 30. Northern portions of the outside waters, winds generally from the east at 30 knots, seas as high as 12 feet. And for Friday's marine forecast, inside waters, winds generally from the north or northeast at 15 to 20 knots there. Outside waters, winds generally from the east at 20 knots, seas as high as 13 feet. Northern Gulf area, winds generally from the east, winds up to 25 knots, seas as high as 16 feet. For Thursday's south central area, we're going to be looking at gale warnings out with winds generally from the east, 30 to 45 knots there, seas as high as 21 feet. In Prince William Sound, winds generally from the east at 25 knots, seas as high as 6 feet. Cook Inlet, winds generally from the northeast at 20 to 40 knots with seas as high as 9 feet near the Barren Islands. And for Friday's south central marine forecast, winds come down. Small craft advisories probably by this point. Winds generally from the east, 25 to 30 knots, seas as high as 20 feet. Prince William Sound, winds from the northeast at 15 knots, seas as high as 4 feet. Cook Inlet, winds from the northeast, 20 to 35 knots, seas as high as 14 feet there in the southern Cook Inlet. And for Thursday, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, around Kodiak Island, looking at some gales there. Winds generally from the northeast, 40 to 45 knots, seas as high as 20 feet just off of Kodiak Island. South side of the Alaska Peninsula, winds from the north, 30 knots, seas as high as 12 feet. North side of the peninsula, winds generally from the northeast or north, 20 to 25 knots, seas as high as 4 feet there in Bristol Bay. And for Friday, winds come down around Kodiak Island, winds generally from the northeast, 25 to 30. South side of the peninsula, winds from the northeast at 20, seas as high as 11 feet. Bristol Bay, winds from the east at 25 knots, seas as high as 6 feet. And north side of the peninsula, winds from the northeast at 25 knots, seas as high as 8 feet. For loosened chain on Thursday, winds from the west, generally from the west, 10 to 20 knots, seas as high as 12 feet out there between Shimmy and Kiska. For Friday, loosened chain, winds generally from the south, 25 to 35, even 40 there out between Shemya and Kiska. Seas as high as 20 feet. And for the west coast on Thursday, winds generally from the east at 10 to 15 knots. Around St. Matthew Island, winds generally from the southeast at 20 knots, seas as high as 10 feet. And for Friday's forecast, winds generally continue from the east, 15 to 25 knots. And then on St. Matthew Island, winds generally from the southeast at 40, seas as high as 14 feet. Pribilofs, winds from the east at 30, seas as high as 8 feet. For the Arctic coast, winds just off the Arctic coast, winds generally from the east, 15 to 20. Northeast coast, just off the coast there, seas generally from the east, 10 to 15. And through the Bering Strait, winds from the east, 10 to 15. And for Friday, winds continue from the east across the region, anywhere from 10 to 20 knots there. And for tonight's weather, we're looking at a low in near just east of extreme eastern Russia, 996 millibar low, occluded front through the Bering Sea and down through the Aleutians with scattered rain showers, snow near Russia, clouds across much of the southwest and west coast, and freezing fog and fog along the Arctic coast, and a 994 millibar low moving into the Gulf with scattered rain showers in the northeast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.